Hi, welcome to Key Questions for Key Staffers. My name is Jim Adderholt. I'm the Vice Mayor for the town of Fort Myers Beach. And this is a show where we reach out to key subject matter experts in order to get out the key issues, particularly as it relates to post-Hurricane Ian. And the objective of the show is to, again, try to find some of the subject matter experts. And Steve Poposki is our guest today. This show will be about permitting, which is one of our key issues today as we try to rebuild. We try to certainly put these shows on the town's social media platforms, but we also try to work with our friends in the media. For example, Beach Talk Radio has been showing the Key Questions show before their regular scheduling program, which we're very thankful for. And we also encourage our other partners in the media, like the Observer, the News Press, the other TV stations, local TV stations, to link to this show when they're doing stories surrounding the appropriate subject matter that they're working on. Abraham Lincoln once said, let the people know the facts and the country will be saved, and this is our attempt to do that. Things are very busy this morning at permitting, and we've grabbed Steve ever so briefly because we think, if we can get some of these questions answered to a broader audience, it'll help alleviate some of the questions that come to his office directly. And Steve's been kind to be with us this morning, probably one of the busiest people on the island. Steve, first of all, welcome. And you came to the town 3 days before the hurricane, is that right?
2 days.
2 days before the hurricane. Well, we're very thankful for your service. And we want to get out some of the most commonly asked questions, some of the problems people have been experiencing as they go through the process. We're trying to work on this process so that the town understands it's critical. Steve has been working relentlessly in his team. We know that there are things that we can do better. We're working on it, we're refining it, and at the same time we're also putting out a lot of permits, but at the same time we know you have questions. So we want to just hit these questions and talk a little bit about some of the basic blocking and tackling. First of all, Steve, people can come and visit and talk to a human in permitting with the town. And we've changed a little bit how that happens to make it easier for people to come. We've expanded our hours. You want to talk just briefly about what the new hours are so we can try to accommodate more of our citizenry?
Sure. Permitting hours are expanded from 7:30 now till 6:30, Monday through Friday, and 7:30 to 5:30 on Saturdays. You can come in, we can help you out with questions. It's also available via email and phone. You can call 239-765-0202 and hit extension 2. That's the permitting desk. Email is buildingpermits@fmbgov.com. That would be the 3 ways.
Steve, how do people, now people are allowed to park in the front or enter near the front of this is Tropical Shores, we're on Tropical Shores at the Estero on that corner. There's a new way to enter the town. I know it's a work in progress, but is it going to be in the front area as opposed to the back now?
Yes, you could enter now at the north side of it's 2545 Estero Boulevard, which is the property just south of the damaged town hall. We're setting up a little more permanent modular units here. It's going to be in a U shape. There you'll see a flagpole. As you drive in on the north side, there's it's a parking lot, and you can park there. You can come up, and the permitting desk is going to be right inside the first building. As you come there, you'll see a set of stairs, a ramp, and you can come in there. We're going to have a room set up where we can kind of walk people through the process if they're really struggling.
Steve, all new applications for permits have to be done through the request portal, which is on the town website. And you start by finding the sand dollar on the town website that says permits on it. Why is it that we're requiring people to go through that portal to submit a document? In other words, if folks come here, they have a hard copy of the form and they fill it out, they can't just hand it to you, they have to submit it electronically through the portal. Why do we do that, and what's the easiest way for people to do that if they're struggling?
I think it was July, before I got here, they went everything electronic. And the idea with that, of course, is to just make it more efficient. If you have a bunch of paper, you end up with a whole line or stacks of paper throughout the entire office. This is a lot more efficient. It actually helps you get your building permit quicker. We do have a scanner, so we have limited staff, but we will help you with scanning it. If you come in, we have printouts. I can give you a form. You can We helped probably 10 people today already this morning. You can get your form filled out and we'll scan it in and upload it for you if you're struggling with maybe not having access to your computer because of the storm or what have you.
Well, you just preempted my next question, because I just had somebody call me this weekend. They came, they had a filled out form and they said they couldn't accept the form. You had to file it through the portal, but there is a process where it's not ideal, but you can scan that filled out application and that'll be then officially submitted through that format?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do that. You can also use I'll give you a little tip. People that have iPhones or Android, but iPhone has an app called Notes. It's preloaded on every iPhone that you get from the factory. So if you click on that, you can actually scan documents using that app and make it, just put, like if you have a stack of paper here, you just take a picture of it and then it says, okay, page 2, and then you take a picture, page 2, 3, 4. It makes one big stack of document. It's a PDF, and then you can, that digitizes it as well. It's basically scanning it. Then you can email that in using, it's not email, you can use the portal to send in that application.
So for somebody who's not IT savvy, if they see a permit application on the website, they print it out and they fill it out, and then they should scan it and then submit it through the portal. How does one do that if somebody's not tech savvy?
Like I said, you can use that app. Pretty much everybody has a smartphone nowadays. So if you're one of those people, you can scan it, make a PDF out of it, then you go into the building services page on the website. It's fmbgov.com. On the right side, there's a dark blue Sandauer logo that says Building Permits and Zoning. You click on that. That'll get you to the building services page. Right at the top of the page, it says, click here to apply for a building permit. So you click on the part that says click here, then you just fill out a few menial details, your name, address, and so forth. Just a few boxes to enter, and then you click on the submit, you click on the attach files button, and then that's when you can attach that PDF to your submittal. Once that's all good, and you click submit, it gets sent to us, and then we review it to make sure that all the documents are there, make sure that they're all signed, completed, there's no missing documents. And so long as everything is as it should be as far as all the documents are present, then it gets sent back for building code review and floodplain review and zoning. So that's the process. It gets sort of back for review. Once it's in review, it gets reviewed by those various licensed individuals, and assuming everything is code compliant, it gets issued. The permit gets issued. At that time, you're emailed with, if you're a contractor that's new, you get emailed with a code that allows you to call in your inspections. Otherwise, you also get a copy of the permit. They send you a link, and you can load additional details on at that point.
Steve, to find the actual forms themselves, you have to kind of look up to, once you get onto the permit part of our website, you have to look up to the left corner, and there's something that says Building Services Application and Forms. Then you click that to see the actual forms.
Right.
And if you fill out those forms, can you, if you fill them out on the computer, can you then ship them over to the portal, or should you do it differently?
Yeah, you should go to the applications and forms. That's where you get your paper forms. You print those out, and then you go ahead and fill those out. Depending on your project, you may be signing some things, your contractor will be signing some things. The instructions are right on the application. We actually do have an interior remodel permit. We're going to go through that here if we have time, and kind of walk through an example. So this is a very common permit after the storm, people with flood damages. And we're going to kind of flesh this out and see if we can answer some questions in the meantime.
That's perfect, Steve. Now, there's been a lot of confusion about whether forms have to be notarized or not. The forms themselves say they need to be notarized, but the town, because of the unique situation of Ian, has decided to waive the requirement that these forms have to be notarized, correct?
Correct.
But in waiving that, we want to make sure people are really careful that the contractors aren't doing what? What does the notary process help prevent from happening?
We just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. The intent of the notary was to make sure that the homeowner themselves is actually aware of what's going on with the permitting of their property. So we're just with that understanding that please be aware of what's going on. We're trying to make this as simple as possible, and prevent a lot of hurdles and things that people aren't familiar with. That being said, just keep that in mind.
So, yes, so be careful, but these forms currently do not need to be notarized. There's been a lot of confusion on that, so that's helpful. Steve, I also, when you go just to the main website, there's a thing on the left-hand side, somebody kind of grabbing what looks like a newspaper, a hand grabbing a newspaper. That's the icon, and it says how to look up the status of your permit. And then you go to first of all, you go to the town's website, which is www.fortmyersbeachfl.gov. And then at the top left, there's something called Building Permit Search. And as I click that and I look at the status, I see a listing of every permit that's been applied for. And I thought it was really interesting. There are a lot of approved permits in that listing, but some of the ones that aren't approved have a couple things. One of them I thought was interesting that some of the permits have, it says incomplete submittal. What does that mean, and how can people? What do you see most commonly? What are some of the mistakes people are making in terms of incomplete submittals, and what advice would you give people so they don't fall into that category?
Well, the first advice would probably be to watch this video. So there, you got that. Follow the instructions on the application. For example, this interior remodel permit has several steps. There's 7 steps listed here to make sure to include. Those are really critical that you read the application, and we try to provide all the information you need. We understand that a lot of people are doing owner-builder. Owner-builders means you're serving as a general contractor, which means you have to. Typically, you're not going to be familiar with the process, so you're doing this for the first time, perhaps. That's challenging. When you do that, there's an additional form you have to fill out called the state law requires. It's called the owner-builder affidavit disclosure form. So it basically explains to you what you're taking on as far as responsibility or liability is for being an owner-builder, and then it just it explains the whole process to you, and you just sign on it. And so that's something that people are not including sometimes. They're mistaking that with another form, which is called the owner acknowledgement, which is another form with required text on it that says, it has at the top, it tells you about the permitting process and the fact, there's some text on here that's required by law, which is why this form is required. So
both of those forms are required.
Right. This should be included. This owner and contractor acknowledgements are included with every building permit application in the file. So if you click on the application and print out all the documents in that file, it'll be in there. Just make sure you include that. I think as we walk through this permit, we're gonna cover some of those really in more detail.
Let's go to one of the other things I saw next to some of the permits that had not been approved yet. Waiting for required document. Is that different than incomplete submittal, or how does that?
You're basically synonymous. Yeah.
Okay, so they're synonymous. And then I saw one that said finaled. What does finaled mean?
Finaled is that you've already had it issued, you've done the work, you've gotten the inspections, and now it's closed or finaled. Okay.
And on that builder owner permit, we've had some. I just ran into the mayor this morning. We've had some challenges where if you have the builder owner permit allows you to do the work, but you can't have there's some concerns about Florida licensed contractors using subcontractors who are not Florida licensed. Help us understand how people can avoid challenges with. Help us understand what the builder owner permit requires in terms of utilizing licensed and non-licensed contractors.
Okay. The owner builder means that for your own property that you own in your own name, you are choosing to be the general contractor, which it may save you a little money perhaps. It's a lot of work. People should understand that there's quite a bit to this process. People do contracting for a living, and there's just a lot of work and stress that's involved with a construction project. So just know that walking into it, that you are allowing yourself to be exposed to that stress. Liability-wise, you're also the general contractor. So if you hire someone who's not licensed, I mean, you're responsible for that. Just know that during a period of emergency, a state of emergency that's been declared by the governor, unlicensed contracting activity is a felony in Florida. So keep that in mind. When you hire people, you need to make sure they're licensed contractors, or if they're going to be helping you out with general labor, they need to be actually your employee. That's state law requires this. So you have to, withhold taxes. You have to, as if you were an employer for in a company.
Okay, one of the other questions I'm getting a lot is people had certain things on their first floor, and the storm obviously has wiped that out. And I hear this term pre-firm 1984. They want to build back what they had before, assuming it was legal. How do they go about documenting that they can go ahead and rebuild what was there before, and so the town would be comfortable?
It's going to vary. I mean, there's the documentation that people have is different. Some people have a lot, and some people have very little. But what the town really needs is just something to show that it was a permitted, approved, allowed apartment or building below that flood protection level, below that base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard. At the time, there was no flood regulations. The National Flood Insurance Program came about around that time. And the date that the flood insurance rate map was enacted, so that was the 1984. So after that, then it became everyone is under these new rules as part of the National Flood Insurance Program. So if you owned a building that was below the flood protection level, below base flood elevation machines, anything that's not used for storage, parking, or access, or a ground floor house anywhere on the island.
Okay.
If you had that and it was approved and permitted as a legal use before that 1984, we just need some sort of evidence that shows that was allowed. It's going to vary between different.
And evidence in terms of pictures or some kind of approval or from.
Yes, I mean, yeah, like I said, we just need to. And there's not really any one size fits all. I mean,
okay.
Typically you may have an approval from Lee County at that time. You may have pictures showing it was pre-existing that are dated. Anything to the effect of to make sure that we can put it on the record, so we can show that it was actually what's called a pre-existing structure.
Okay. One of the other questions I get is a little bit different, but somebody is trying to figure out whether they can get underneath the 50% rule, and they've hired a private appraisal, and they've got for a private appraiser and gotten a private appraisal, paid for it. And if it's 35% different than what the county's appraised, apparently, as I was reading the regs last night, the regs say that the town may require a second appraisal. That seems like a hardship to folks. Do they have to get a second appraisal? Because isn't the appraiser putting their license on the line when they do the first appraisal? Why would they have to do a second one? And why are we requiring that?
Well, we go based on our floodplain ordinance. The floodplain ordinance was written in the way that you just mentioned. It says that another appraisal may be required. Sometimes these appraisals are drastically different. Like the Lee County property appraiser may have a value of, say, $100,000 for the building, and somebody shows up with an appraisal and it says, well, this appraisal says it's $600,000 for this building, and we have to make sure that the floodplain ordinance is written in a way because the National Flood Insurance Program wants to be absolutely sure that this is a real appraisal. What I suppose they must be afraid of is someone kind of going rogue and just writing appraisals just because they're friends with someone and saying, look, I'll write it up. You want it to be 500? We'll make it 500. You know?
We don't ask for a second one for a structural engineer. We don't ask the second one for the electrician. It just seems odd that we ask one for the.
It's because of the way the floodplain ordinance is written. I mean, obviously that could be changed, and then we wouldn't require it anymore.
But that's a town policy, not a state or county policy. Okay, interesting. Let's talk a little bit about some of these forms. The most common one, I shouldn't say the most common, but one that's commonly submitted these days is the demo application form. Would you talk a little? I know you had said this is a relatively simple form to fill out, but let's talk a little bit about when does one need to do a demo application, permit application with the town? Talk a little bit about what its purpose is and when it's required. And then if you want to explain how it's filled out, that's fine too.
Sure. So the Florida Building Code requires a demo permit to be obtained when doing demolition, either partial or full demolition of a structure. So if you're partially, like say you had a 2-unit or a duplex, and you were taking out one of the units and you were going to rebuild one of the units, that's a partial demo. If you're taking the entire thing out, then that's a full demo. So that's the demo application. We've streamlined it so that you apply online with us, and then we issue the permit, and then you go ahead and go through the other steps like confirming with the Lee County that the sewer system is cut and capped correctly. That's really one of the main intents of the permit, not the only one. Another one is to make sure that the water supply system, which is the town, make sure that they can inspect it and confirm that it has been capped correctly. We want to make sure that these sewer and water line connections are not broken and leaking sewage or water. It can be very expensive and damaging to the environment. So it's one of the main intents. If it's a non-residential, like a commercial, it does go through, or a 3+ residential, a residential structure with 3 or more units, or a non-residential, like a commercial industrial. That application goes to the fire department as well, and they do a review and inspection as well. Also, if you have a propane tank, some sort of fuel gas tank on the property, to indicate that in the form, because the fire department would like to work in conjunction with you to ensure that that's done safely.
Excellent, thank you. Then the next, you'd already talked about this owner-builder disclosure statement and the notice of commencement, 2 key forms, right?
Sometimes, yeah, that's pretty common that people forget that one. It's not applicable to every permit. So most permits are actually pulled by contractors, but when homeowners are doing
Wait, this is for our vision. When you say a permit is pulled, it means it's applied for, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Typically, the contractor is the licensed professional will apply for the permit on behalf of the homeowner. If for whatever reason, perhaps the owner wants to maybe try to save some money and not hire a general contractor, they may decide to be an owner builder. And when they do that, the state law requires that it's a 2-page form. It requires that be disclosed and signed by the property owner to make sure they understand the responsibilities that they're taking on. So that's very common for them to forget that one. On the demo permit, you want to make sure you include some sort of site sketch. It doesn't, as long as it's legible, it's fine. It can be done by hand, but we want to know what you're demoing. Basically, you're going to draw a sketch of the property, indicate that you're taking out, this half of the house, the entire house. It can be fairly simple, but we just need to know what it is that you're exactly doing. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. So obviously, there's still the qualifier and the owner. So if you're an owner builder, you're a qualifier. The qualifier is typically the contractor, but as an owner builder, you are the general contractor. So if you're demoing this yourself, you'd be the qualifier. If you are hiring or subcontracting with a demolition company or a contractor to do the demo, and you still want to be an owner builder for whatever reason, you can do that. You just include a subcontractor confirmation form and have that contractor fill it out, and then they would sign the qualifier, because they're the qualifying person with the license.
Steve, we're going to go through an interior remodel application. I think you've got that in front of you. Before we do that, as we talk about contractors, obviously you're having a lot of these permits pulled or applied for by contractors. Any advice that you want to give to the contractor community, that is particularly those that are new to doing work on Fort Myers Beach, or to the residents who are hiring these contractors, in terms of just giving them advice about what are the common mistakes you're seeing in terms of applications being applied for with contractors? I know a lot of these folks are savvy in this process, but some of them are new, some of them just may not know our system. Anything you see that you want to mention, any word you'd want to get out to the contractors or to the residents to tell their contractors as they make application?
I would say print out the different forms, both so if you're going, say, to get a trade permit or a residential permit, you would print out all the forms so you can see them in front of you.
Just for people who are watching, what's the difference between a trade permit and a residential permit? What does that mean?
So a residential permit would be, for example, if you're building a brand new house, you would get a residential permit. Also, if you're renovating both the inside and outside of your house, you got your roof to do, you got soffits, you got siding, you have also the inside, you got to do new cabinets, trim, drywall. Inside and outside, it can go under one residential permit. An interior remodel would be everything except the outside. So a residential permit without outside is interior remodel.
And that's the one we've got in front of us here. And just to give people an example, Steve's going to walk through just the various steps of filling out this interior remodel application. That's a common one that the town gets, and Steve's just going to kind of walk us through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, just to finish the previous
I'm
point,
sorry,
you print out the forms so you can see them. Sometimes I think it's easier to, especially if you're kind of new to the town as far as permitting, print out the various forms at least in the section that you're applying for, like interior remodel. Also, print out the subcontractor confirmation form, all the other associated forms at the bottom of the page. There's quite a few in there, and it may be applicable to your project. So if you can see them out in front of you, it's a lot easier just to put them like so. Whereas on a small computer screen, sometimes you get them shuffled up a little bit. I would do that, and as you read through the forms, you'll see that this one is definitely this is for me, because it's talking about attaching a subcontractor. So you got to print, include that one in there.
Okay.
As far as the application goes, make sure that when you print it out, there's instructions.
This is the interior remodel application. This is for people who are doing work inside their house.
Right.
And when do I realize I've reached a threshold where I've got to file for a permit to do my interior? What are some of the triggers that say, oh, I'm going to need a permit because I'm getting pretty far along in all of this?
Yeah, any kind of construction. I mean, you're pretty much talking about requiring a permit. I mean, the Florida Building Code is very general. I don't say vague.
And when you say the Florida Building Code, just so folks know, the vast majority of these permits are required by state law. This isn't the town trying to make people's life difficult. This is what the state of Florida requires everywhere throughout the state, for the most part, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And the intent ultimately is to make sure that your permit, that the work is being done that's code compliant. It's going to be safe. It's going to be not cause problems for you in the future. Imagine even just having a water leak, a poorly done plumbing or electrical. I mean, it could be life threatening. So, and then structural. I mean, you want to make sure the place doesn't come down or have issues that are going to cost you time and money and really life safety. So that's the intent. Building codes pretty much says that, as a general statement, almost everything needs a permit when you construct something.
And for our viewers, there is a list on that permit section in the permit sand-dollar. You go in there. There is a list of things that don't require a permit. And there's a list of things that do. And I always thought that was really interesting and helpful too for people. Mm-hmm. And I would be remiss if I didn't take this minute to really stress to our viewers. I know this is an overwhelming process, but we do on the permit sand-dollar. If you click that, we've got this section called Frequently Asked Questions. Now it's gotten to be pretty lengthy, but at the same time, it's really valuable. And if you're a realtor and you're advising other people, or if you've got a lot of friends and neighbors doing this, please, or if you're doing it yourself, please read that Frequently Asked Questions section. It will answer so many questions ahead of time. It may cause you to have more questions, but for the most part, it really gives you a great overview of the most common questions that we're getting, and it'll save you time and effort from calling the town or having to come down to the town. Maybe your question will be answered in that series of frequently asked questions. But I really encourage everybody to become conversant with that, because I think it'll save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Agreed. It's probably almost 50 pages now. I started writing that when I got here.
Well, 50 pages with the answers.
Oh yeah.
But only 2 pages with the questions.
You click on it, and you'll see the section on the general permitting. You'll see a section on the 50% rule. You'll see it on zoning and so forth. Yeah.
So let's go through the interior remodel application just to kind of walk people through the process. I'll let you do that.
So, like I said, any application, make sure you read it, because there's instructions in each one. This first, number one, though, you need detailed scope of work. It doesn't need to be typed out. It can be handwritten. Just make sure it's printed so it's legible. Basically, this is making sure that we understand what you're doing and where you're going to be doing it. That's the scope of work. So even just a piece of paper where you're writing one, replacing drywall, bottom 4 feet of drywall throughout entire house. Number 2, replacing fiberglass insulation in bottom 4 feet of house, as an example.
That really helps.
That way we can see. Number 3, replacing HVAC system entirely, or whatever it may be, and so on. And just make sure everything is detailed and indicate what you're doing and where you're doing it. Number 2, if you're modifying the layout of the house, you're going to need plans for that, so that we're going to get a different area. But if you're doing that, we need what was there before and then what you propose. So we need 2 site plans showing what you had before and what you want to make it into. So
And because this is an interior remodel, this would be like if you were moving a wall, interior
Right.
wall. Okay, yep.
Right. So that's number 2. Number 3, location of all electrical and plumbing changes. You can obviously say you're repairing electric, and generally that's probably going to be fine for your basic interior remodel. But if you are moving electrical services or adding circuits or adding receptacles, we need details on that and where you're doing that. So when the inspector comes, they can very quickly understand that. For example, maybe you're adding electrical receptacles in the master bedroom. So you would put that on your scope of work with a little number, and then on your site plan you'd also put a number by your master bathroom on your bedroom, and you'd indicate this is where we're doing that work. Number 4 is replacing windows. This is an important one. This is one that people forget. In Florida, the state law requires when you're putting in a new window or a new door that it has to have a product approval number on the outside. Any window or door that's put on the outside envelope of the building envelope, which is basically, well, it's the outside. You're either inside or outside, it's dividing those two. It requires a product approval number or a Miami-Dade notice of acceptance. Either one is fine here. They're very similar. Notice of acceptance is a little bit more stringent, so that's also acceptable here. But so your Florida approval number is going to be like 239.2, for example. Maybe that's a window. You can look that up on just to verify that at floridabuilding.org. There's a product approval search. Every product that's sold for the exterior envelope in Florida requires and has one of those product numbers. So all we really need is that number. We don't need like the entire packet, 100 pages of detailed installation instructions, because with that product approval number, like, let's say if you were doing all your windows, you would list all the product approval numbers that you're using with little labels like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on your site plan you'd put, by that window on the site plan you put 1, 2, 3, label this bedroom, label this, office, whatever it may be. So then we can see like this is where the windows are going to be, and the inspector shows up. They can get to their, basically inspect it very quickly and understand what you're doing.
Okay.
So be sure to include those in numbers. Just need the numbers. Those have to meet certain design pressures. Okay. This is getting a little more complicated, but this is this is the building code. Design pressures are basically the amount of pressure that the wind exerts on a building during a high wind event. So it has to meet a certain standard. That information needs to be included as well. So you need the product approval number, and then we need to know what the design pressure is. A positive pressure when the wind is pushing on it, and there's a negative pressure when the amount of pressure that it's pulling away, like keeping the window from flying out away from the building, the window or door. So there's a positive and negative. It'll say something like plus 65, negative 65. That's
And the vendor for the windows would have that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Include that information as well as the product approval number, and that's what we need for that. That's only if you're doing windows or doors on the outside of the building. The interior doors, they don't have that information associated with them because it's inside.
Okay.
Number 5, repair improvement cost form. So this is something that the National Flood Insurance Program requires after a storm. We need to make sure, this is what we call as a 50% rule. We need to make sure that all of the work that you do to repair your building to pre-damaged condition, it's below 50% of the building value just before the storm. Without getting too far into the weeds, that's essentially it. It's called a 50% rule. The frequently asked questions page has many pages on it. There's a lot of good material to read about that.
Well, we talked about that in the first time you were on our show. Yep.
That repair cost form, we need that because you might be doing drywall insulation, you're doing trim, cabinets, what have you, and we need to. That cost form is going to show labor and materials, which we need both. An estimate on what these are going to cost you. And at the bottom, it's going to say, whatever it says, it's going to be $20,000, and then your building value may be 200,000.
How does somebody who's not familiar with this, how do they put an estimate on the labor?
Yeah, so it has to be reasonable. We have a figure from the state. They did a survey recently, about a year ago, of sort of general construction labor, and that was $17.50 per hour. So
How many hours would you know it would take? Just
again, it's an estimate.
okay.
Right?
So are there formulas somewhere that the people could look up to utilize that make this easier?
You could ask a contractor. They'd probably be able to give you a very straight answer and say, well, how long would it take you to do this? And they'd
Okay.
say, well, it's going to take me 100 hours.
Okay.
You know, it's going to be I have to put 2 guys on here all week. You know, as an example, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I can put that in there times, $18 an hour.
Okay.
And then you get that figure, and that's just that line. Fill out everything that you're doing to the house on that cost form. Make sure that's on there. If you've demoed, you have to associate. Well, the rules, the federal rules with the National Flood Insurance Program are that you have to list your demolition costs. So it may not be that much of material because it's mostly labor, but you have labor and materials for that as well. Even if it's like you went in there and you took drywall out by hand, that is part of the cost. It just has to be included on the form. So that's a real important one. And I think what's very common is people are leaving things off. They're leaving demolition costs off, and it's very specific that you do need to include that. So just go line by line. If something's not applicable, then put NA, for not applicable. Otherwise, make sure you put something on that form that your estimate, and do a good faith estimate. An easy way to do it would be to have a contractor come and give you a bid. A general contractor would come and say, look, to repair everything that you've mentioned here, A through Z, it's going to cost X number of dollars. And then they give you that quote, and then you can include that quote instead of you trying to estimate. They said, look, I got a quote for all this. It said it's going to be 80,000, whatever it may be.
Right, that's
and then you
good
include that quote with your cost form and just indicate that this was on the form was 80, whatever, and then you. So it substantiates what you just put on there. That's going to be the easiest way.
Okay.
You can also do everything yourself, and you can estimate those costs. So that's 2 different options. You can do some. You can do quotes, and you can also do some of the work if your contractor's okay with that, or if you're the owner builder, maybe you're the general contractor, so you decide what happens.
Okay.
Number 6, a Florida certified design professional must digitally or electronically sign and seal all plans. So that's required by building code. So anytime a design professional, like an engineer or architect, comes up with plans for a house. So if you're doing anything as far as changing walls, you're changing systems, you're adding on, you're subtracting, if you're not putting back exactly the way it was, and the scope of work is getting pretty substantial, you need to have a design professional come up with a set of plans. For example, you're adding walls here, maybe you're doing some structural work, absolutely you need the plans, that's required.
Okay.
They're going to sign and seal and date, so they put a seal, it's usually electronic, they sign it and date it, and it shows their license number and says that I wrote this plan for you as a contractor to build this house. That's what that means. If you're doing that level of work, you need to include that.
Okay.
Subcontractor confirmation form. If you're an owner builder and you want to do everything, your own 2 hands, nobody's going to be helping you with this. You're literally going to be working on it just yourself. All right, you don't need it because you are the contractor, and we understand. You've signed that to say that. If you're hiring anyone, you need to attach them as a subcontractor. Unless they are, like I said, unlicensed, then they're going to be your employee. You have to set that up. But that's outside of our purviews, so to speak. If they're a licensed contractor, then we're very familiar with that process. So you'll have them sign that subcontractor confirmation form, and then you include that with your application. If you're not sure what your contractors will be, like I just need the permit right now, and I think I'm going to do it myself, but I might hire somebody to do the electric. If that's your comfort level, then you can always get your subcontractor confirmation form signed and sent over to the town after you get the permit. Just do it before you get typically before you start construction, or always before they get to inspection.
Okay. Is that the extent of the form, or any other advice on this particular form? Does that cover everything?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of it. We have the scope of work, we have the site plan here, we have the what's called the owner and qualifier acknowledgements. This is all bundled in the same format. It says owner or authorized agent of owner at the top, and the other one says qualifier. So qualifier is the contractor, or if you're the owner builder, then you can be the you're also the qualifier. So you're the owner and qualifier. You can sign both of those. Repair improvement cost form. Make sure you fill this out completely. Subcontractor confirmation form, if it's applicable to your project. We have bids here. This is like a general contractor said it's going to cost you this amount of money to do everything.
Okay.
You can include that, and that's your estimate.
Okay.
There you go. Any proposals, bids. If you're doing multiple lines, plumber, electrician, contractor, whatever, include bids for all those to substantiate it. So if that's the way you're going to be doing this, you need to include the bids in there to show. That's important.
Yes.
As part of the flood review, the rules are that they need to have bids to show to substantiate it.
Okay.
There's in the cost form, there's a contractor and owner's affidavit as part of that form. So you'll notice it's not a duplicate. It has different wording on there.
Okay.
Those. Okay. And this is really useful and helpful. This is the tax roll value letter from the Lee County Property Appraiser's Office. Most properties will have this now. And on here, this building value, this one here, it says $407,000 and change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the value of the building, that fourth row of that table in that letter. So if you go to Lee County Property Appraiser's website, leepa.org, and you enter in your address, you click on parcel details and then tax roll value letter, that letter will appear, and that is, according to the property appraiser, that's your building value before the storm. 50% of that, or divided by 2, is the threshold or sort of your budget for repairs until you come into that whole 50% threshold or rule, where now you have to bring everything up to the current code. You can't just repair it where it is. You have to bring up the code. And one of the most important aspects of that is you have to elevate everything above that base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard.
Yeah.
So that becomes a very important threshold.
Steve, I'll go ahead and finish that. I want to ask you about that floodplain thing. We're talking about looking at the flood maps for the town, and people ask me, how do I know where I'm at on the flood? How do I know how high I have to elevate? What's the easiest way to give people?
If you go to fmbgov.com and then you go down to the bottom where it says flood information, you click on that, there'll be a little link that says, what's my flood zone? You can click on that, you can enter in your address. I'm going to just give an example of Town Hall for now.
Yeah.
Say 2525 Estero Boulevard, comma, Fort Myers Beach. Hit enter, it'll pull up the flood map, and it'll have a little pin like you're in Google Maps.
Uh-huh.
And next to that pin, if you look around, there'll be a flood zone and a signification there. So it'll say something like AE11 or VE12 or whatever it may be. And AE obviously is the A is the flood zone. So it's of a type A. Anything that starts with A has certain rules. Anything that starts with the V is more high risk and it has different rules.
And is the island have a wide variety throughout it, or are there just a couple sections which are different, or is it all
There's
over
a
the
wide
place?
variety, yeah. It's based on topographical maps, and the federal government revised those. November 17 of this last year, actually, they were revised. So your flood zone may have changed.
And that'll tell you how high you now have to elevate if you decide to go up, correct?
Yeah, surprisingly, some of these flood zones have decreased in stringent. So I mean, you may have been an AE12 before, maybe you're now an AE11, where you only have to go up to 12 feet instead of 13.
Well, I would just say to our viewers, I know some of this has gotten a little bit dry at the end, but I'm telling you what, if you're working on your home or your business or your resident or your rental, whatever you're working on, this information is so critical to people because their lives are really revolving around it as they rebuild on our island. So I'm so thankful for Steve, for his time and his team's time. I know people still have challenges getting through, but they're doing their best. They're expanding their hours. We're beefing up their resources. They're improving the process. We can always do better. But please, again, go back to the frequently asked questions. Please share this video. If you've got friends who are building, rebuilding, doing it themselves, using contractors, or just in the process, please link this video to your Facebook page, or just forward it directly to your friends and neighbors who are involved in this process. This could save a lot of grief and headaches down the road. It is a complicated process, particularly for people who are not normally involved in this. So to try to navigate it, I hope this video has been helpful. I thank Steve for his time. Hopefully this will answer a lot of questions preemptively. But I do encourage people to go back to that town website, read those frequently asked questions, because there's just a ton of great information. And even if you don't need it, a friend or neighbor might have a question that you've heard that you can refer that section of the website to. So again, thanks for joining us. Share this with your friends or neighbors. Steve, thanks for your time. Thanks for your team. And we appreciate everybody's involvement in all this and their patience. And we wish you a great day. God bless. Thank you.